So with that, I'm going to turn this over now to Nakima Levy-Armstrong, a civil rights attorney and the head of the Wayfinder Foundation, as well as Racial Justice Network. Nakima?
Thank you, Michelle. What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
This is a familiar refrain that we have had to yell through the streets of Minneapolis and the Twin Cities for almost a decade, and for some people, many, many years before that. It's really sad that it took a small group of dedicated citizens to call upon the Department of Justice to investigate the atrocious, horrific, and brutal behavior of the Minneapolis Police Department. And although the Justice Department head, Merrick Garland, did not give specific examples of native-born African Americans who have been killed by police, it has really been on the backs of those individuals whose names many people do not know, whose faces they have not seen, whose stories they have not heard, that really brought us here today. In addition to, of course, the brutal police killing of George Floyd on May 25th of 2020. So I want to take a moment and I want to call out some of the names of Black individuals, Hmong individuals, and other people of color who have been killed since before 2016, which is the point at which the Department of Justice decided to launch its investigation. If we thought what we heard today was bad, imagine if they actually went back decades and talked about the history of brutality, the use of excessive force, unjustified arrests, abuse, and treating a vulnerable community as if it were under siege. Things would be far worse if they look back even further. So in honor of those who have lost their lives to police violence under very questionable circumstances, I want to call out some of those names in remembrance of them, starting with Fong Lee, Tysel Nelson, Q the Blacksmith, Lorenzo Doby, David Smith, Dominic Felder, Anthony Williams, Christopher Burns, Terrence Franklin, Jamar Clark, Chaser Fong Vu, Thurman Blevins, Travis Jordan, Delaw Eid, Tekle Sundberg, Amir Locke, of course, George Floyd, and we also can't forget about Winston Smith, who, although was not killed by Minneapolis Police Department, he was killed by the U.S. Marshals in the city of Minneapolis as we were mourning the police murder of George Floyd. And most recently, we had a police killing at the hands of the FBI in the city of Minneapolis. So we do not feel safe. We are grateful that the Department of Justice has finally decided to intervene. This intervention was long overdue, and we are hopeful, we are doing our best to put our trust in them, that they will hold Minneapolis elected officials accountable, because they have not been accountable to the people. Not just this current administration, but going back many, many administrations in which they knew about the atrocious behavior of the Minneapolis Police Department. They quietly settled excessive force lawsuits to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and they failed to correct the injustices and the abuses and the policy violations that have been going on for years. So to see elected officials and those who have been appointed on television today saying that now they're going to do what they need to do is a slap in the face, particularly to those who have been oppressed, those who have been abused, those who have been crying out for justice, and those who have not been heard in the wake of the violence that has happened. We do not have trust in these systems or in these individuals because they have failed us time and time and time and time again. That story needs to be told. Even as we have documented evidence of what has happened to Black people, we don't see an apology to Black people in the city of Minneapolis. We don't see reparations to those families who have lost victims, who have lost their loved ones to police violence, where the officers were never held accountable, some of whom are still on the job to this day, preparing to not only continue collecting a paycheck and benefits, but also a pension for the abuse that they inflicted upon Minneapolis residents. So we ask you today, how is that acceptable? Minneapolis residents deserve better. What about all of the individuals who are still incarcerated, who have been wrongfully incarcerated at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department, falsifying evidence, lying in documents, lying in court, and still no real accountability? We have not seen a movement by Hennepin County judges to overturn those cases of those who have been wrongfully convicted. We have not seen a movement by those in authority to remove officers from the force who have a history of abuse against people. If you think Derek Chauvin was bad, look at the records of many of the officers who are a part of the Minneapolis Police Department. It wasn't just about one officer, it was about a system, and it's about a culture that has refused to change. So we stand here today in solidarity with the families who have lost loved ones to police violence, with people in the community who have been victimized and forced to suffer in silence as a result of what they endured, and those who do not trust the system because the system has let us down time and time and time again. So we call upon the Justice Department to not just work with the city of Minneapolis as it enters its negotiation, but to make good on what it said today, which is that they want the involvement of the community. So that means working in solidarity with us to continue to apply pressure to those in positions of power who have failed the residents of the city of Minneapolis. We also call upon the Minneapolis Foundation, which is an organization that I used to serve on the board of, that hired former Mayor R.T. Ryback to be its president. Under his leadership and the leadership of Chief Tim Dolan, we witnessed the continued erosion of the Minneapolis Police Department. We witnessed corruption, we witnessed abuse, we witnessed police murders, and instead of the foundation, a community foundation, holding this man accountable, they decided to hire him as their chief executive. As a philanthropic executive myself, I take issue with that. We need to hold leaders responsible, no matter how long ago they were in office, if they are a part of this mess that we are dealing with today. So we ask people around the country to continue to stand in solidarity with the residents of Minneapolis. Indeed, your voices made a difference when you took to the streets in the millions to call for justice for George Floyd and for other victims of police violence. Our work does not end here. We have to continue to be vigilant. We have to continue to hold elected officials accountable. And if we have to continue to take to the streets, then that is what we must do. What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
All power to the people.
Toussaint Morrison, who is a community activist and independent media person. Come on up, Toussaint.
Thank you, Michelle. Just across the street, the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, told a story of May 25th. After he watched the video, he said he went home, paced throughout his palatial brownstone, and then said to himself, everything has to change. I find that fascinating. I find that negligent. I find that exceedingly ignorant. Because when I was in 5th grade, walking down the street after school and got pulled over by cops, bent over on the hood of it, I had the same thought. Wow, everything has to change. How is it that we have a leader that needs to see a public lynching of George Floyd to think everything has to change? Did he not understand Terrence Franklin was shot in the back of his head, execution style, 2013 in Uptown? Does he not understand what happened to Jamar Clark? Does he not understand what happens in this city? And he sits up there with Brian O'Hara and then holds a PR session for the Minneapolis Police Department to say, hey, if you're a resident, we want you. He might have been talking to one of y'all, one of the press people. Come on over, be part of MPD. He literally said, be one of us. After they were just read for filth by Kristen Clark, saying they bent children over on a car after stealing a $5 burrito and had guns pulled out after 3 seconds getting out of their car, shooting at a car full of 6 people, telling Somali people that they didn't get the job done after Black Hawk Down. And the issue is the collective silence of white communities in Minnesota that have failed to talk about this. This is why it keeps happening. Why does it take the DOJ pulling up with a consent decree for people to say something? Why? Why am I standing in a press room full of white journalists and it's just me and a handful of other black people there to watch and talk about it? Why is that? And you don't need to answer that right now. You need to talk about that after this press conference. You need to drill that question home. Because when they use that as a promo for the MPD, look no further than propaganda at the end of the DOJ's press conference. Come be one of us. Come be one of us. Do the killing with us. No. We need change. We need to address what they were talking about disproportionately pulling over people of color, mainly black people and indigenous people. Kristen Clark said it was a first that they've seen this much brutality after pulling over black and indigenous people. They addressed people with disabilities. They did not address houseless encampments that they brutalize all the time. And they did address people suffering from mental health crises. And they said they had a small pilot group that went around and they addressed mental health crises, but it wasn't enough because there's still MPD pulling up. The DOJ said it plain and simple that police are not able to deal with people that have some type of mental crisis. They said it right there. They said it right there in front of you. And if the MPD can't do it, then somebody else needs to. There needs to be change brought to this city. And furthermore, doting upon what the mayor said, walking throughout his palatial brownstone saying everything has to change. Yes, many things have to change. And it is very sad that we have leadership here that it just dawned upon them on May 25th, 2020, because there are plenty of black people up here and indigenous people here that have known things have had to change their whole life. Right. We don't need to see a public lynching to know that things have to change. And I hope that the leadership here can do something about it. And my further hope is, like the hard work that all these people do up here, keep the conversation going in your white community, regardless of the discomfort. Brian Stevenson, the head of the Equity Justice Initiative, talks about the litany of brutality brought upon bodies of color. But he says one thing he'll never get over is the collective silence in white communities to turn the other way.
Listen.
Stop turning the other way.
That's right.
White silence and violence.
That's right. That's right. Okay, just 1 second. Next, we'll hear from Aaron Abraham with Minnesota Justice Coalition.
It's Aaron Abram, A-B-R-A-M. I'm here on behalf of the Minnesota Justice Coalition. I'm a native Northsider, born and raised, whether 35th and Oliver or 10th and Emerson. And I can tell you, when I was accosted by the police when I was younger, I was told I was a liar. When I was placed in a position where I said, this is not true, and the court said differently, I was called a liar. Today, you are finally seeing, hearing, and understanding what we have been saying the entire time. What Michael Brown was saying the entire time. What Q was saying the entire time. And so now, what are you gonna do about it? Okay? Now I'm here to speak on behalf of the president of the Minnesota Justice Coalition, Mr. Jonathan McClellan, M-C-C-L-E-L-L-A-N. When the Minnesota Justice Coalition drafted the letter that we all signed asking for the patterns and practices investigation, we were in a place that desperately needed help. Let's not forget why we are here. Over the past 3 years, the Twin City communities have attempted to process and grieve the murders of George Floyd, of Daunte Wright, of Winston Smith, and several others. The lack of transparency and accountability from law enforcement has intensified and divided the community. Since then, the Minnesota Department of Human Rights released a scathing report that outlined their 2-year investigation into whether the Minneapolis Police Department and the city engaged in a pattern of racial discrimination. Sadly, this report confirms what protesters, community leaders, activists, and just regular old citizens like myself have been saying the entire time. It is not a level playing field for black and brown folks here, unfortunately. Our community members are hunted, surveilled on social media without a public safety objective, have to deal with propaganda that are racially profiled and brutalized. Furthermore, these officers are never held accountable by leadership or their own management. The U.S. Department of Justice found out something similar. Today, the Justice Department reported that the Minneapolis police engaged in a pattern of violating constitutional rights and discriminating against Black and Native American people, and concluded that systematic problems in the Minneapolis Police Department made what happened to George Floyd possible. Today's report found that Minneapolis police officers used excessive force, including unjustified deadly force, violated the rights of people engaged in constitutionally protected speech. I was one of those people at Black Xmas, if you remember that, at the Mall of America. I was slammed in the parking lot as they told me to leave. I did what they told me to do, and I still was arrested. I still was charged. I still had to plead for saying Black Lives Matter. I didn't hurt nobody. Read the reports. There was no damage to the Mall of America. We were held for hours under the mall. Women that needed heart medication had police officers stand in front of them and pour water in their face when they said I needed my medication. That's where we have been when we say we out here, when we say we're doing the work. They violated the rights of people engaged in constitutionally protected speech and found that both Minneapolis police and the city of Minneapolis discriminated against people with behavioral health disabilities when officers are called for help. The report outlined 28 remedial measures agreed to by the city and a consent decree to be overseen by an independent monitor. Our main question is in the negotiations for the change, in the enforcement of the consent decree, and we need to make sure that the individuals that are chosen to monitor the consent decree are chosen by the people, and that the process encompasses all community members' input in moving forward. It is extremely important that the integrity of the process is kept in place and voices are heard. Imperative. While Minneapolis has been a good place to start for the patterns and practice investigations, there is also evidence that suggests that the per capita rate of death at the hands of the police in St. Paul is equal to or greater than that of Minneapolis. In April of 2021, the lieutenant governor for the state of Minnesota said that Minnesota is a place where it is not safe to be Black. We are requesting that a patterns and practice investigation be opened on the St. Paul Police Department as well, due to the relationship that they have had with the city of Minneapolis and the potential for cross-contamination. We are also asking the county attorney's office to reinvestigate cases that were passed over by the previous county attorneys, starting with the murder of Jamar Clark.
Listen!
It is important that an independent investigation shed light on the patterns of misconduct that exist in these agencies. We need reform. And ultimately justice for the victims. And establish trust in our institutions that are supposed to be protecting us. Isn't that what we pay for? Ain't that where your tax dollars go? Your tax dollars shouldn't just be used to pay somebody who abused somebody. It should be used to help protect the property that you have, the people you live with, and the family and community that you love. But instead, we're paying out. We still need your help to bring the change and adherence to the Constitution by our government. We know there is no silver bullet to solve the problems before us. However, we need a systemic reset that prioritizes our collective humanity. It was said a long time ago, and I'll say it again. it is always the right time to do the right thing.
Nissan.
And this report shows they haven't been doing the right thing. So my question for everyone else is, what are you going to do and signify it as the right thing to get the right result? Thank you.
Yes, I'm Myon Burrell, M-Y-O-N, Burrell, B-U-R-R-E-L-L. It hurts for me to hear every one of these speakers get up here and for them to have to compel and yell and scream just to ask for justice. It pains me to know that it has to be an independent, non-biased party to come in and actually oversee the Minneapolis Police Department in order for my people to receive justice. But right now we come in, we asking for the opportunity for our community to be involved in everything that's taking place. The people that actually suffer the injustice. Me personally, I suffered injustice. I spent nearly 2 decades of my life in prison for a crime I didn't commit. And the whole time I was in there, my family, my community was out here beating the pavement, screaming, yelling, trying to compel the system to do right by me. And every time they got to the door was shut in their face. It was slammed. And it took for us to take to the streets to beat the pavement, you know what I'm saying, to actually receive justice, We come in today and we asking for the opportunity for y'all to do right by us. What this system is breeding is hopelessness in my people. Every time you put your trust in their hands, you're let down. Every time you go into these systems believing that that you'll be able to correct them, you actually realize that they're functioning exactly the way that they were designed to function. And right now we need a new culture in the state of Minnesota, not just in Minneapolis, in the state of Minnesota. This is police brutality and it's victimization. These police have predatorial conduct, predatorial behavior, and not just on adults, on children as well. We look at how they're preying on our babies, and there's no accountability. You see mothers losing their children every day, you know what I mean, crying for help, asking for the people to come out there to actually see these people held accountable, and nothing happens. For me, I sit there and watch people that impose their wrath on me, stole nearly 2 decades of my life, destroyed my family. I came home and seen them still working on the same police force, you know what I mean, still acting on those same predatorial behaviors. And so I know that if this isn't stopped right now, history will continuously repeat itself. And we need to stop it right now. And we're in a position to do so. So we're coming to you asking the DOJ to allow the community to be a part of this, to actually listen to the voice that has been muted of my community and give us the opportunity to actually receive justice. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jerome Richardson. Again, like she said, thank you so much, Michelle. Executive Director of Minnesota Teen Activists. I'd like to begin with saying, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And until the media becomes sick and tired of reporting on Black death, until the mayor, until the AG, until the DA, until the department, and all other agencies that contribute to us being sick and tired of being sick and tired, we will never see the light and the day that we desire to see as Black human beings living in a state and in a democracy that all lives should simply matter, right? And so as I reflect today and as I look around this room, it is very underrepresented of the amount in the population, rather the demographic of Black bodies that are dying. It's ages under 25 that are consistently dying at the hands of police. Literally, my peers, my brothers, my sisters, my classmates, my friends, my family, young Black men and women and queer persons under the age of 25 is the biggest statistic that is dying from police. And that is not okay. It is your children, it is your neighbors, it is your students, and it is your young people who you prize to have this tremendous future, who you invite to be on your panels and sit and have conversations about what Gen Z needs, but yet we are the ones that are dying. Have you not seen for the past 3 years, thousands and thousands of young people on the front line demanding justice, not only for themselves, but for the people around them and in their community who have been affected by not only gun violence, but also police violence. So you're telling me I can't go to school and be safe? I can't go to my community and be safe? I can't be on my couch like Amir Locke and be safe?
Listen.
Because the color of my skin. I'm gonna list a couple names here in the state of Minnesota that's under the age of 25 who died at the hands of police. Amir Locke, Isaac Aiden, Takelay Sundberg, Dalal Eid, Courtney Williams, Jamar Clark, Dante Wright, Demetrius Hill, Khalil Azad, Justin Tigan. That's only a small percentage of the amount of young children that are dying at the hands of police. So I just implore you, I urge you to take a wider scope than what you just see on Instagram and on Twitter and going viral on CNN, and really come into the community and really speak to community members and really take a deeper look at what's not only being presented to us, but what's happening all around us. This is not a new phenomenon. This is not a new idea. This is not a new issue. So why are we still piloting in the year 2023?
Right.
There's no more room for pilots. There's no more room for trials. There's no second chance for human beings' lives. So in order for us to get to the place that we desire to see and that we talk about, we need to completely audit the BCA. We need to completely audit Hennepin County Examiner Office, who's covered up countless of times all the murders that have happened on the black bodies that are living in Minnesota and all across the world. Not only that, but we have active lawsuits on almost every agency in the Twin Cities that we're referring to. Why? Because they know, the court knows, and we know that this injustice is happening every day. And so those around me and those behind me and those before me and those who are even my peers are living a crisis every day. You thought the pandemic was an issue? You thought COVID-19? How about being black?
Listen.
Let's talk about that. And for me as a 19-year-old young black male who beats almost every statistic that you've journaled about, that you've reported about, how about us, let's actually be the change that we desire to see and not let it be a cliche or a headline, but let's actually have it a realistic idea, imagination even, if you will. It shouldn't be a utopia. It shouldn't be another society. We shouldn't have to have a reinvestigation team like CUAPB. We shouldn't have to have families supporting families against police violence. We shouldn't have to have support groups and Minnesota teen activists. We shouldn't have to walk out of class. We should be able to live in a society and in a world that is destined for us to live the American dream in a place that was no longer or was never originally for us, but that we created and built an infrastructure for ourselves. So us creating organizations and NGOs and all these things is nothing new. We've been creating prototypes and strategies since the Underground Railroad. Beloved, I present to you not a new idea, but a crisis, a pandemic, an epidemic, a world emergency where black bodies like myself are consistently dying at the hands of police, at the hands of gun violence, at the hands of being under-resourced, at the hands of a system that has a pipeline into almost every institution that young people come through. And so today I stand not on behalf of young people in the state of Minnesota, but in solidarity for the thousands from northern Minnesota all the way down to Rochester that have walked out, that have marched, that have screamed, that have gone viral on Instagram and TikTok, that have interviewed, that have talked about their traumas, that have cried, that have grieved, that have been through pain, that have been through sorrow. I'm standing in solidarity with them, not because they can't be here, because they're absent not only from spaces like these, tables like these, but they're absent from our world because they're dying daily. And so please, take this moment not as an opportunity for propaganda, not as an opportunity for a photo op, not as an opportunity for a raise, not as an opportunity for being a white savior, but as an opportunity to really have compassion and do something about it. Do something about it.
My friend Nakima invited us here today, so we're here to stand in solidarity. And I can't help but fight back tears because there's so many common threads here. As a member, a citizen of a federally recognized tribe here in North Dakota, the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara Nation. We see the injustices day in and day out over 500 years. You know, as the original peoples of these lands, we continue to not be seen or treated as human beings. So as I was listening to the Department of Justice's press conference today, I couldn't help but think of our elder and our relative, Leonard Peltier, who is sitting behind bars, and we pray and hope and work that he doesn't die behind bars. He's a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians, and he's been incarcerated as long as I've been alive, since 1977. So we know that he is being made an example of being original peoples of these lands. We are the first peoples of these lands, but yet we are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of treatment. We are only but 2% of the United States population, but yet we are overrepresented in every jurisdiction, every county jail, city jail, federal prison. Our women are missing and murdered. It is a crisis. Our men are targeted and incarcerated, so our protectors are not there to stand with us and to protect us. So enough is enough, and we're here to stand in solidarity. We know that justice is on the way, and we can't give up. So Madzigidads, and thank you for allowing us to say a few words. Please, it's time to free Leonard Peltier. Madzigidads.
Yes, yes, yes.